Now, turning our attention to the Middle East, and news out that Israel is planning to flood Gaza with humanitarian supplies. That's according to their officials, after a previous policy to restrict certain aid deliveries to the Strip for fear it was falling into the wrong hands, and also as a lever of pressure on Hamas to release Israeli hostages. I mean, this really has been now, I think, the call from a lot of Western governments, America, UK. You know, there are civilians in there, you've got to go in and help them. What do you make of this announcement?
Well, I think it's the right thing to do. I think, firstly, we have to consider that the war has gone a long way towards achieving Israel's objectives so far. But when you control much of the territory, you do have to take responsibility for the civilians living there. And if there is no immediate end to the war, because the Israelis have to finish that job and get rid of the Hamas leadership, who cluster down in Rafah at the moment, they've got to work out a way to alleviate the humanitarian suffering that's been a byproduct of what remains a just war and a war that's totally legitimate, but you've got to alleviate that. And allowing the aid in now is a sensible move in order to help people to recover from the conflict. And of course, it's not a question anymore of worrying so much that it will go to the wrong hands, because Hamas has been beaten back in much of the Strip. Well, therefore, you've got to look after people and make sure that that is alleviated. And that will help the Israelis, I think, to be able to complete their military mission, end the war on the right terms, which is a defeat of Hamas, and then begin the process of reconstruction of Gaza under new leadership.
I mean, at the start of this war, Israel were very quick to sort of let journalists in and say, look, this is what we're doing. We're giving out leaflets and announcements. We're sending text messages to people saying, move from this location. This is where we're going to be. One assumes the terrorists all said, OK, right, great, thanks for that tip-off. I'm also getting out of here. But they've come under a lot of fire. And despite saying, look, we're trying to do things forensically with surgical precision, they have come under a lot of fire for the number of casualties there. And in terms of a global PR operation, I think they're sort of on the back foot. Do you think the criticism has been deserved?
No, I don't think it's been deserved, because if you look at the casualty numbers, as horrible as they are, we forget, don't we, that war brings casualties. War in urban areas brings casualties. The question you have to ask yourself is, number one, was the war justified? Certainly. The Israelis were attacked unprovoked by a terrorist group, okay? So the war is a just war, and Israel's objectives to remove the terrorist group who caused the murder are entirely just and legitimate. So it's wrong to be criticising that and wrong to be saying we need a ceasefire without Hamas being removed and the hostages being returned. But then you move to the second bit, which is the casualty rate. If you look at historic rates of casualties, military historians have pointed out the historic norm in an urban warfare environment is a 9-to-1 ratio, 9 civilian casualties to 1 military casualty. Well, let's just take for a second the Hamas run Ministry of Health figures. Let's just assume they're correct. I'm not going to argue about whether they are and they aren't. Let's just go that they're correct and 30,000 have died. Well, if you take that as correct, you've got to also take into account that 10,000 of those are Hamas fighters who Israel have said have died. So we'll take both those points. Well, that gives you a 2-to-1 ratio of civilians to military. That is an extraordinary ratio, the kind of ratio that I predict will be studied for years in Western military schools to go, how do we replicate that should we have to fight in similar circumstances? The Israelis have been very careful as they've gone in. Yes, individual mistakes have happened, no doubt about it, but that's war for you.